the news.
Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News, with a few bits of news for you to choke on from March 27th. Donald Trump is playing his favorite game again, making life hell for the people who can least afford it. This time, he's decided to target critical medications by threatening massive tariffs on European-made pharmaceuticals. Because when you're a twice impeached, 4-time indicted lunatic with a personal grudge against reality, why not take a sledgehammer to the one industry that keeps people sane? What does he want to look tough on? Prescription drugs? The chronically ill? Children with rare diseases? Basic human decency? European pharmaceutical companies are scrambling to get their products into the US before the tariffs hit because they actually understand supply chains, unlike the guy who thinks windmills cause cancer. Shipments are being rushed like they're illegal contraband because in Trump's America, getting your insulin refill might soon require smuggling. And what's the point of all this? A manufactured crisis, of course, because Trump's entire economic strategy is picking fights where none exist, then forcing everyone else to clean up the mess. And in that case, that mess is going to look a whole lot like skyrocketing drug prices, empty pharmacy shelves, and Americans being told they just can't afford to live anymore. Let's break this down for the people in the red hats. Pharmaceutical tariffs don't hurt big pharma. They hurt you. They mean that your medications, insulin, cancer treatments, immunosuppressants, and antibiotics get more expensive overnight. And if you think insurance companies will just absorb the costs out of the goodness of their cold, dead hearts, I have a gold-plated Trump steak to sell you. Of course, though, Trump's fans won't care. The same people who froth at the mouth over gas prices will somehow rationalize the government deliberately making life-saving medicine more unaffordable. They'll tell you it's about America first, as if diabetics should be patriotic about their impending medical bankruptcy. And if you're struggling, well, maybe you should have just made better life choices, right? Because at the end of the day, this isn't about economic strategy. It's not about helping American companies. It's not even about punishing foreign corporations. It's about cruelty for the sake of cruelty. It's about giving Trump another way to break things just to prove he can. And if people suffer, if they die, that's not an accident. That is on purpose. Oh look, another crazy blacklist from the Trump administration, because defending Jewish students is when you target universities for not cheering on Israel's ethnic cleansing loudly enough. Muhlenberg College and 59 other institutions just got slapped with investigations for anti-Semitism, and most of them have no idea why. I do, because in Trump's America, anti-Semitism now means criticizing Israel in any way. Muhlenberg fired a professor last year over anti-Semitism. They handled it, but somehow they're still on this mystery list of shame, with the Department of Education warning that their funding could be yanked. And they're not alone. 1/3 of the schools on this hit list have no unresolved complaints. Some have zero history of anti-Semitic incidents. So what did they actually do wrong? They allowed students to protest the genocide in Gaza. That's it. That's the crime. If students dared to criticize Israel's war crimes, or worse, if professors spoke out about Palestinian human rights, suddenly their school is under investigation. Never mind that actual Jewish organizations like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace are also condemning Israel's slaughter in Gaza, because in the Trump era, you're only the right kind of Jewish if you support apartheid and bombing refugee camps. And because America is a low-budget fascist theme park now, Trump put ex-WWE executive Linda McMahon in charge of education policy. And she's been talking about protecting Jewish students. Protecting them from what? From hearing opinions they don't like? Because that's what this is really about, shutting down free speech, controlling academia, and making sure that no one questions the US blindly bankrolling genocide. The Department of Education doesn't even have enough staff to investigate all these cases, so this isn't even a real crackdown, it's just a scare tactic. The message is clear: fall in line or get defunded, because if Trump can slap the anti-Semitism label on anyone he wants with no evidence, then nobody is safe. Not universities, not students, and definitely not you. Good news, America. The Trump administration just saved you from the terrifying menace of public health funding. That's right, $12 billion in federal health grants just vanished. Because in Trump's world, diseases only exist when they're politically useful, and if you're sick, you should have just bootstrapped harder. These weren't just some leftover COVID handouts. This money funded measles prevention, bird flu monitoring, mental health programs, addiction treatment, and other basic necessities that keep people from dying in the richest country on earth. But according to HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., noted anti-vaxxer and human YouTube comment section, none of this is important anymore. Trump's logic? The pandemic is over, so why should we fund health services? Yeah, because every public health crisis definitely disappeared the moment Trump said so. No need to worry about measles, outbreaks, opioid overdoses, or the fact that our mental health system is one bad week away from a total collapse. But hey, if you can't afford treatment, just pray harder, right? The funding cut is hitting states like New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, and Washington the hardest, because those states had the audacity to take public health seriously. And since Republican logic dictates that these states must suffer for their sins, thousands of jobs and essential programs are about to get axed. But don't worry, the Trump administration is still funneling billions into tax cuts for billionaires and military contracts, so at least Boeing will be okay. This is all part of the administration's holy war against wasteful spending, which, in case you haven't noticed, only applies to things that help regular people. Can't afford insulin? Tough luck. But if Elon Musk needs another government handout for his flaming Tesla death traps, the check is already in the mail. So what's next? Are we just going to dismantle the CDC because diseases are woke now? Should we replace hospitals with prayer circles and bootleg ivermectin shops? At this rate, the Surgeon General is going to be some dude on Telegram selling essential oils. In a rare moment of political unity, European leaders got together to actually do something useful, pledging more support for Ukraine against Russia's ongoing invasion. In a Paris summit featuring around 30 nations, France threw down 2 billion euros in military aid, including anti-tank missiles, surface-to-air missiles, armored vehicles, drones, and Mirage fighter jets. That's right, Ukraine just got some French fighter jets, so if Putin thought things were bad before, he's in for a few new surprises. This was all part of the Coalition of the Willing, which in this case is just a fancy way of saying the countries that still give a damn. Led by France and Britain, the summit focused on keeping Ukraine armed and exploring the possibility of actual peace negotiations, because apparently some people still think you can negotiate with Russia while its drones are actively blowing up Ukrainian cities. One of the biggest debates, a potential reassurance force, a European-led military presence to make sure Russia doesn't just regroup and try this invasion again 5 days later. But unsurprisingly, not everyone was on board, because apparently sending weapons to Ukraine is fine, but putting actual boots anywhere near Russia makes certain leaders break out in cold sweats. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer reminded everyone that now is absolutely not the time to ease up on Russia with sanctions, because rewarding a war criminal while his army is still actively committing atrocities might not be the best strategy. And over in NATO, Secretary General Mark Rutte made sure to remind the US and Europe that they need to stay unified, because if one side decides to go rogue, Putin wins. So where does that leave us? Ukraine gets more weapons, Russia hopefully keeps losing, but Europe is still tiptoeing around the idea of actual deterrence. The message to Putin is clear though. Europe is backing Ukraine. The only question left is whether they'll fully commit or keep half-hearting it while waiting for it to end. In yet another move straight out of the authoritarian playbook, the Trump administration has now ordered U.S. spy agencies to aim their satellite surveillance tech at the U.S.-Mexico border, because apparently using military-grade espionage tools against the desperate migrants is the new normal. The National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office agencies that usually track enemy military movements, foreign nuclear threats, and actual dangers are now being repurposed to watch over people fleeing economic collapse and cartel violence. And in case that wasn't dystopian enough, Trump declared a national emergency at the beginning of his presidency that he then weaponized to make this happen, because a national security crisis is when a bunch of families are trying to cross the border for a better life. Of course, this is all under the guise of fighting drug cartels, but let's be honest, if Trump cared about stopping cartel operations, maybe he wouldn't have pardoned the man behind the most prolific online drug trafficking operation in history. This isn't just about watching the border. The administration is funneling millions of taxpayer dollars into defense contractors to build an AI-powered digital wall. Yep, the big beautiful wall just got a tech upgrade, because why waste money on something that physically exists when you can overpay a defense company to make an invisible version? And if this all sounds like a perfect excuse to expand domestic surveillance powers, congratulations, you've been paying attention. Civil liberties experts are already warning that this level of military surveillance could easily be turned on US citizens. And if history has taught us anything, any new spying power will eventually be used against the people who were told it was for their safety. At this point, all that's missing is a few dystopian billboards flashing "Big Brother is watching" over Texas, and we're officially in a sci-fi police state. In a stunning display of brilliant government efficiency, or also known as catastrophic short-sightedness, Trump's Health and Human Services Department just announced mass layoffs and restructuring that will slash 20,000 jobs. Nothing says great healthcare system like firing the people who run it. 10,000 workers are getting the axe outright, while another 10,000 are being shoved into early retirement or voluntary separations, which is just like a fancy way of saying leave before we push you out. Their reasoning? Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claims HHS is an inefficient, sprawling bureaucracy and insists that it can run better with fewer people, fewer resources, and a whole lot more wishful thinking. And who's getting hit the hardest? Oh, just some of the most critical agencies that are keeping Americans healthy and alive. The FDA is losing 3,500 employees because apparently making sure food and medicine aren't poisoned is just bureaucratic red tape. The CDC is slashing 2,400 jobs, and I mean, what has the CDC ever done that was so important? You know, besides handling pandemics, outbreaks, and public health crises. The NIH is dropping 1,200 employees because who needs medical research when you have the power of positive thinking? In case that wasn't enough of a nightmare, entire agencies are being dismantled, merged, or outright erased, with some functions being absorbed into a brand new Frankenstein department called Administration for a Healthy America. Because what better way to improve government efficiency than to fire everyone, destroy institutional knowledge, and cram everything into a rushed, untested mega bureau? But wait, there's more. While HHS claims that this will save $1.8 billion annually, there's zero transparency on how those numbers were calculated. But don't worry, I'm sure gutting federal health agencies will have absolutely zero consequences on disease prevention, drug safety, or medical research. This isn't about efficiency. It's part of the Trump administration's broader strategy of dismantling public services under the guise of reform. We've seen this playbook before: cut funding, fire experts, break institutions, then turn around and claim the government doesn't work. If you thought the healthcare system was a disaster before, buckle up, because when your food gives you E. coli because the FDA is underfunded, when you have limited access to medication because of tariffs, when the next public health crisis spirals out of control because we're basically dismantling entire health organizations, just remember, at least we save some money. You ever accidentally send a text to the wrong person? Maybe you meant to message your friend, but instead told your boss about your weekend bender. Embarrassing, sure, but at least you didn't accidentally leak US military plans to a journalist. That's exactly what happened in the Trump administration's national security signal chat, where a bunch of top officials discussing military operations in Yemen somehow forgot to check who was in the group, and whoops, turns out journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was right there, probably blinking in disbelief as national security secrets just poured into his phone like a spammer with a USPS link. Normally, something like this would trigger a massive FBI investigation. We've seen it happen before, but Attorney General Pam Bondi has basically shrugged it off, saying there won't be one because the leaked info was technically unclassified. You know, just some battle plans, no big deal. These are the same people who have had a long history of hammering others for far less. Remember Hillary Clinton's emails? FBI investigation. David Petraeus leaking classified info to his mistress? FBI investigation. James Comey's memos? FBI investigation. Trump officials spilling military plans in a group chat like a bunch of drunk uncles at Thanksgiving? We'll do an internal review. Democratic lawmakers are furious, demanding an actual investigation because, and call me crazy, maybe, just maybe, our national security shouldn't hinge on Trump officials knowing how to use group chat settings. But since when has accountability ever applied to these people? And let's not ignore the real kicker. This was a conversation about military action in Yemen, a conflict the administration barely wants to acknowledge exists, while still casually plotting operations over Signal like it's a GTA online heist setup. The whole thing is a joke, and just like every other scandal, it'll probably get buried while Bondi and the gang pretend this is totally fine and normal. If there's one thing we've learned, it's that in Trump's America, some people get investigated, jailed, silenced, and others just oops their way out of treason. If you haven't been paying attention, the United States just launched its most intense bombing campaign in Yemen in years. And if that sentence didn't make you immediately pause and go, wait, what? Congratulations, you've been successfully desensitized to endless war. Since March 15th, 2025, the US has dropped bombs on Yemen 56 times in a single week. An escalation so intense that it makes the last airstrike campaign look like a practice run. The target, Houthi rebels, who have been attacking Israeli-linked vessels and firing missiles at Israel amid the ongoing genocide in Gaza. But let's be real, the only reason this is happening is because the US is funding Israel. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, two of the biggest backers of the war in Yemen, are actively in peace talks with the Houthis. They're trying to de-escalate the conflict. Meanwhile, the US just waltzes in and starts carpet bombing urban areas like it's 2003 again. Don't let the official military statements fool you. The US is being intentionally vague about civilian casualties. They're claiming 0 confirmed civilian deaths, but Houthi sources say at least 57 people have been killed, and given our military's track record, I know which one I'd believe. The US isn't just dropping a few bombs either. They've deployed 2 aircraft carriers and B-2 stealth bombers from Diego Garcia to carry out these attacks. This is an insane level of firepower for a group of fighters who control Yemen's capital but pose 0 direct threat to the United States. None of this is being debated. Congress isn't discussing it. The media is barely covering it. No one in the administration is explaining how this benefits everyday Americans because, spoiler alert, it doesn't. It's just another senseless military adventure that will kill people, create more instability, and manufacture more anti-American sentiment for the next generation of conflict. So while the Yemenis are waking up to the sound of American bombs, most of us won't even hear about it, and that silence, that's the real strategy. Donald Trump has been ranting about tariffs for years, insisting that there's some kind of economic masterstroke that will make America great again. But guess what? His latest round of tariffs is about to gut the very states that put him in office. According to new analysis by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, cities in Trump-voting states are about to get wrecked by Canada's retaliation to his latest economic tantrum. The hardest hit places? San Antonio, Detroit, Kansas City, Louisville, Nashville, Columbus, Chicago, and Cleveland. Notice anything about that list? Almost all of those cities are in red states. Detroit alone sends 40% of its exports to Canada. San Antonio, 50%. These places depend on trade with Canada. And what has Trump done? Slapped a 25% tariff on imported cars and auto parts, which will jack up prices, kill jobs, and said the auto industry spiraling in cities that voted for him. Brilliant strategy. And now Canada is gearing up to hit back. Prime Minister Mark Carney called Trump's move a direct attack and is preparing to retaliate. So while Trump struts around pretending this is some 4D chess move, he's actually kneecapping the economies of the very people who put him in power. Trump is selling this as a tax on foreign companies, but the reality is Americans are the ones who will pay. Tariffs don't make other countries suffer. They just drive up the prices for consumers and screw over American workers whose jobs depend on exports. But hey, at least Trump gets to keep the illusion of being a tough neighbor, right? Too bad the people who believed in him the most are about to be the ones to pay the price, literally. A federal judge just gave the New York Times the green light to take OpenAI and Microsoft to court over copyright violations. This isn't just another lawsuit. This is a full-blown battle over the future of journalism, AI, and who actually owns the words we read. Judge Sidney Stein ruled that the Times lawsuit can move forward, rejecting OpenAI's desperate attempts to make it disappear. The core accusation? That OpenAI stole the Times' articles to train ChatGPT without permission, without payment, and without a care in the world. The argument is simple. If AI models are just regurgitating stolen work, how is that not copyright infringement? OpenAI, of course, is playing dumb, claiming that everything they used was publicly available and that their training process falls under fair use. But let's be real, if you run someone else's work through a machine, scramble it a bit, and spit it back out without a credit or compensation, that's not innovation, that's theft. This case is just the beginning. Media companies are lining up to take on big tech for rating their work without paying a cent. If the Times wins, expect a tidal wave of lawsuits from every major news outlet that has been quietly watching OpenAI and Microsoft vacuum up their content like digital pickpockets. So the stakes are massive. If AI companies get away with this, it's basically a green light for them to strip mine journalism, books, and art with 0 consequences. But if the Times wins, it could force OpenAI and Microsoft to start paying for what they take or completely rethink about how they build their AI models. Either way, this isn't just a lawsuit, it's a fight for the soul of creative work in the AI era. That's all for Brainrot News. Like and subscribe because if we don't keep yelling, they'll pretend none of this is happening.